I walked into my parents' house carrying wrapped gifts, excited to share news about my promotion at the tech startup, where I work as a software engineer. At 28, I had worked incredibly hard to buy my downtown Denver condo. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air as I headed toward the kitchen to help Mom with dinner preparations. That's when I heard it. My parents and sister Sarah were discussing plans to give Baldwin's place to the kids, since he travels so much for work anyway. My heart stopped completely. They were casually planning to move Sarah's unemployed husband Jake and their 3 children into my $360,000 condo, without asking me. I stood frozen in the hallway for several long moments processing what I had just overheard. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the conversation. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to walk into the kitchen with a bright smile plastered across my face. "Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. Traffic was brutal coming from downtown," I said, setting my gifts under the tree. Sarah looked up from the mashed potatoes she was stirring. "Baldwin, perfect timing. We were just talking about you." "Oh yeah, good things I hope," I replied, trying to keep my voice light and casual. My father Robert chuckled from his position at the kitchen island. "Always good things about our successful son. Sarah was just telling us how grateful she is for your generous offer." My stomach dropped, but I maintained my composure. "Generous offer. Don't be modest," my mother Linda chimed in, pulling the turkey from the oven. "Letting Sarah and her family stay at your place while Jake gets back on his feet. It's exactly the kind of thing your father and I raised you to do." Sarah beamed at me. "I've been telling everyone what an amazing brother you are. Jake and the kids are so excited to finally have some stability." I needed more information, so I carefully probed with seemingly innocent questions. "How long has Jake been out of work now?" 6 months. Sarah replied, her smile faltering slightly. "The construction industry has been really tough lately. But with your place, he won't have to worry about rent while he figures things out. And the kids, how are they handling everything?" "Oh, they're thrilled." Sarah's face lit up again. "Tommy keeps asking when they get to move into Uncle Baldwin's cool downtown place. And little Amy wants to know if she can redecorate the guest room to be more girly." My parents exchanged warm glances. "We're so proud of you, son," Dad said, patting my shoulder. "Family comes first, and you really understand that." During dinner, the conversation continued to revolve around my supposed generosity. I learned that Sarah had been telling the story to everyone for quite some time. My Aunt Martha called right in the middle of our meal. "Martha wants to talk to you," Mom said, handing me the phone. "She heard about what you're doing for Sarah." I took the phone with trembling hands. "Hi, Aunt Martha." "Baldwin, honey, I am just so impressed with your kindness. Your mother told me at Thanksgiving how you offered your beautiful condo to your sister's family. In this economy, that kind of generosity is rare. You're a special young man." "Thank you, Aunt Martha. That's very kind of you to say. I've been telling all my friends at the Bridge Club about it. They're all amazed that someone your age would be so selfless." After I hung up, Sarah pulled out her phone. "I want to show you something," she said, scrolling through her messages. "Look at all the sweet texts I've gotten from family about your offer." She showed me her screen, and my blood ran cold. There, clear as day, were text messages that appeared to be from my number. The messages read things like, "Of course you can use my place," and "The kids need stability, more than I need a downtown condo," and "Family takes care of family." But I had never sent those messages. I had never even discussed Sarah's housing situation with her, let alone offered my home. "These are really nice messages," I managed to say, studying the fake texts more closely. The phone number was correct, but the messaging style was completely wrong. I never used that many exclamation points or emoji. "I've shown them to everyone," Sarah said proudly. "Mom, Dad, Jake, even the kids' teachers when I had to explain why we might be changing addresses soon." The realization hit me like a freight train. Sarah had fabricated these text messages and had been showing them to our entire family as proof of my generous offer. She had been planning this deception for months, carefully building a narrative that painted me as the loving brother who was voluntarily giving up his home. When were you thinking of making the transition? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Well, we were hoping right after New Year's. Jake spoke up for the first time. That gives us time to pack everything up and get the kids mentally prepared for the move. And it works perfectly with your work travel schedule, Sarah added quickly. Mom said you're always going to different client sites anyway, so you're barely home. I looked around the table at my family, all of them smiling warmly at me, all of them completely convinced that I had offered my home to my sister's family. The weight of Sarah's manipulation was staggering. She had not only lied about my supposed offer, but had created fake evidence to support her story. I think that timing could work, I said quietly, already forming a plan in my mind. As we finished dinner and moved to the living room for coffee and Christmas cookies, I excused myself to the bathroom. I needed a moment alone to process everything I had learned. Sarah had not just casually mentioned wanting my place. She had orchestrated an elaborate deception involving fake text messages, family members, and even the children's schools. When I returned to the living room, the conversation had shifted to logistics. My parents were discussing which of their friends might have extra furniture to help Sarah's family get settled. Jake was talking about converting my home office into a bedroom for Tommy. Sarah was sketching room layouts on a napkin. They were not just planning to take my home. They were planning to completely reorganize it to suit their needs, as if it already belonged to them. After the family gathering ended, I hugged everyone goodbye and told them I was looking forward to helping with the transition. The moment I got into my car, I drove straight to my downtown condo, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I needed to see my home to remind myself that it was real, that it was mine, and that I had worked incredibly hard to afford it. The 30-story building rose against the Denver skyline, and I felt a surge of pride, as I always did when returning home. This place represented 3 years of overtime careful budgeting and sacrifice. But as I pulled into the underground parking garage, I noticed something strange. There were boxes stacked in my designated parking spot. Not just any boxes, but moving boxes with Tommy's room and kitchen stuff, written in Sarah's handwriting. My heart pounded as I took the elevator to the 15th floor. How had these boxes gotten here? I unlocked my front door and immediately noticed that things were not quite right. The spare key that I kept under a decorative rock by my door was missing. I walked through my condo, slowly taking inventory. In my home office, I found more boxes tucked behind my desk. In the guest bedroom closet, there were children's clothes hanging on hangers. In my garage storage unit, I discovered furniture covered with tarps and labeled with masking tape, indicating which rooms they were destined for. Sarah and Jake had not just been planning to move in. They had already started moving in. I called my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who lived across the hall. She was always home and had a clear view of who came and went from my unit. "Oh, Baldwin, dear," she said when she answered her door. "I've been meaning to ask you about the family with the children who have been coming by so frequently." Family with children. Yes, a lovely woman with dark hair and her husband. They've been here quite regularly over the past few weeks. They had a key, so I assumed you had given them permission. They were very polite when I asked about it. The woman said she was your sister, and that you were letting them use the place. My stomach churned. How often have they been coming by? Oh, quite often. At least 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes with the children, sometimes without. Last week they were here with an older couple who I assumed were your parents. They were measuring the rooms and taking lots of photographs. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and returned to my condo, immediately checking my security system. I had cameras installed at both entrances when I first moved in, mainly for package deliveries. I scrolled back through the footage from the past month, and what I found made my blood boil. There was Sarah, Jake, and my parents touring my home like they owned it. In one video from 2 weeks ago, Sarah was pointing to different rooms and clearly explaining to my parents how they would rearrange the furniture. In another clip, Jake was measuring my office space while Tommy ran around the living room. But the most disturbing footage was from just 3 days ago. Sarah was giving what appeared to be a full tour to people I did not recognize. She was gesturing proudly around my living room, pointing out features like the floor-to-ceiling windows and the downtown view. One of the strangers was taking notes in a small notebook. I called my lawyer friend Marcus, who specialized in real estate law. Even though it was late evening, he answered on the second ring. "Baldwin, what's going on? You sound stressed." I explained the entire situation from the overheard conversation at dinner to the discovery of their belongings in my home. "This is definitely a problem," Marcus said after I finished. "Even though they're family, they're essentially trespassing and possibly planning some form of fraud. You need to document everything immediately." "What kind of fraud?" "Well, if they're telling people they live there, they could potentially try to establish residency. In Colorado, squatters' rights can become an issue after a certain period. More importantly, if they're using your address for official purposes, like school enrollment or government benefits, that's a serious legal problem." Marcus advised me to change my locks immediately and to gather all the evidence of their unauthorized entry. As we spoke, I continued reviewing security footage and discovered something even more disturbing. The next morning, I decided to investigate further. I drove to my parents' house and parked down the street watching their driveway. Around 10 o'clock, I saw my father leave the house carrying a folder of papers. I followed him discreetly to a real estate office in their neighborhood. Through the window, I could see Dad sitting across from a woman in a business suit. They were reviewing documents together, and at one point, she was pointing to specific sections of papers and shaking her head. I waited until Dad left, then approached the office. The receptionist was friendly when I explained that I was Robert's son and was curious about the meeting. "Oh yes, your father has been trying to understand property ownership laws." The realtor, whose nameplate read Janet Morrison, explained. "He was asking about cosigner rights and whether someone who co-signed a mortgage has any legal claim to transfer property ownership." My heart sank. Dad had co-signed my mortgage 3 years ago when I was just starting my career and did not have extensive credit history. It was purely a backup guarantee, and he had never contributed a penny to my mortgage payments, down payment, or any other expenses related to the condo. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "Well, I explained that co-signing a loan does not grant ownership rights," Janet said. "The person whose name is on the deed owns the property regardless of who helped with financing. But he seemed convinced that he had some legal authority over the property." "Did he mention why he was asking?" "He said his daughter needed housing and that his son would be happy to transfer ownership to her, but they wanted to make sure all the legal steps were handled properly." I thanked Janet and left the office with my mind reeling. My father was not just supporting Sarah's plan to move into my condo. He was actively trying to figure out how to legally transfer my property to her without my consent. That evening, I drove back to my condo and conducted a thorough search. Hidden in my kitchen junk drawer, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a notarized document that I had never seen before. It was a property transfer form, with my forged signature attempting to deed my condo to Sarah. The notary seal looked official, but when I examined it closely, I realized it was fake. The paper was regular printer paper, rather than the heavy stock used for legal documents, and the notary information did not match any real notary in Colorado when I looked it up online. Sarah had not just been planning to move into my home. She had been planning to steal it from me entirely through forged legal documents. I spent the rest of the night documenting everything I had discovered, taking photographs of all the evidence, and preparing for what I now realized had to be a complete confrontation with my family's betrayal. The following morning, I called Marcus again and arranged to meet him at his office immediately. I brought all the evidence I had gathered: the security footage, the fake text messages, the forged property transfer document, and photos of the belongings that had been moved into my condo. Marcus reviewed everything with the careful attention of an experienced attorney. His expression grew increasingly serious as he examined each piece of evidence. "Baldwin, this goes way beyond family drama," he said, setting down the fake property transfer document. This is attempted fraud, forgery, and possibly conspiracy. Your sister has committed several felonies here. What are my legal options? Well, you could press charges which would likely result in serious criminal consequences for Sarah, and possibly your parents if they were involved in the forgery. Or, you could handle this privately by making it clear that you're aware of their plans and that they need to stop immediately. As we discussed my options, Marcus discovered something else troubling when he ran a property search on my address. There's been recent activity on your property records, he said, staring at his computer screen. Someone has filed a change of address form with the county listing your property as the primary residence for a family of 5. My stomach dropped. When? 2 weeks ago. The filing shows Jake and Sarah's names along with 3 children. They've officially claimed residency at your address with the county clerk's office. How is that possible without my permission? Unfortunately, it's easier than it should be. If someone has access to basic property information and presents identification showing they live at an address, the county often processes these changes without verification from the property owner. Marcus pulled up additional records on his computer. This gets worse. They've used your address to register, to vote to enroll the children in school, and to apply for state benefits, including food assistance and healthcare subsidies. The scope of Sarah's deception was staggering. She had not just told family members that I had offered my home. She had created an entire false legal record, establishing her family as residents of my property. There's more. Marcus continued scrolling through official documents. Jake has listed your address as his primary residence on unemployment benefit applications. He's been receiving state assistance based on the claim that he lives at your address and pays no rent because his brother-in-law owns the property. I felt sick. So they're committing welfare fraud too? It appears so. And if they've been receiving benefits based on false residency claims, that's a federal crime. Marcus printed out copies of all the fraudulent filings and helped me understand the timeline. Sarah had been executing this plan systematically for over 2 months. First, she had created the fake text messages and begun telling family members about my supposed offer. Then, she had somehow obtained a key to my condo and started moving belongings in gradually. Next, she had filed false residency claims with multiple government agencies. Finally, she had attempted to forge property transfer documents. The good news is that none of these fraudulent filings actually give them any legal right to your property, Marcus explained. Property ownership is determined by the deed, and your name is the only name on that deed. But the bad news is that untangling all of these false claims will take time and effort. What about squatters' rights? In Colorado, adverse possession requires open and notorious occupation of property for 18 years, with the knowledge that you're trespassing. Since they've been claiming to have your permission, and since it's only been a few months, squatters' rights don't apply. As we finished our meeting, Marcus advised me to immediately file police reports about the trespassing and forgery, change my locks, and notify all the government agencies about the fraudulent filings. But I had a different plan forming in my mind. That afternoon, I decided to do some additional investigation. I drove to the elementary school near my condo, the one that served the neighborhood where I lived. At the main office, I explained that I was checking on enrollment information for my address. Oh yes, we have 3 children enrolled from that address, the school secretary confirmed. Tommy, Amy, and little Brad. Their mother provided all the necessary documentation when she enrolled them for the spring semester. What kind of documentation? Proof of residency, which was a utility bill in her name for that address, and guardian identification. Everything was in order. I asked to see copies of the enrollment documents, explaining that I was the property owner and needed to verify the information. What I found was another layer of Sarah's fraud. She had somehow generated fake utility bills showing her name and my address, and had used these to enroll her children in school. But there was something else troubling in the enrollment file. Sarah had listed my condo as a family property, and had indicated that the children lived there with their uncle who travels frequently for work. She had even provided a phone number for me as an emergency contact, but it was not my real phone number. When I called the number, it went to a voicemail that said, "Hi, you've reached Baldwin. I'm traveling for work, but we'll get back to you soon." The voice was clearly Jake's poorly attempting to imitate my speech pattern. From the school, I drove to my parents' neighborhood to continue my investigation. I parked outside their house and waited. Around 3 o'clock, I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. A moving truck pulled up to their house. Not a large commercial truck, but a rental truck from a national chain. Jake and my father began loading furniture from my parents' garage furniture that I now realized had been collected specifically for the planned move to my condo. I followed the truck from a distance as it drove directly to my downtown building. Using my phone, I recorded Jake and my father unloading furniture and taking it up to my floor, using the building's service elevator. They had clearly been planning this move for weeks, collecting furniture and preparing to completely set up house in my home. When I returned to my parents' house later that evening, I was greeted by my mother as if nothing unusual had happened. "Baldwin, honey, what a nice surprise. We weren't expecting you 2 days in a row." "I was just in the neighborhood," I said. "How has your day been?" "Oh, wonderful. Robert and Jake have been working so hard to get everything ready for the big move. Sarah is so excited she can barely contain herself." "Where is everyone now?" "Well, Sarah took the children to get haircuts before their first day at their new school next week. Jake and your father are probably still at your place, setting up the furniture we've been collecting." The casual way she mentioned them being at my place as if they had every right to be there was breathtaking. "What kind of furniture have you been collecting?" "Oh, the most wonderful donations from our church and the retirement community. When we told everyone about your generous gift to Sarah's family, people were so inspired that they started offering furniture and household items. Mrs. Henderson gave us a beautiful bedroom set for Tommy. The Johnson family donated a dining table that will be perfect for your space. I realized that my parents had been accepting charity donations from their community under the pretense that I was voluntarily giving up my home and that Sarah's family needed help furnishing it. Dozens of well-meaning people had been contributing items based on my mother's false story. "That's very generous of everyone," I managed to say. "It really shows you what kind of community we live in," Mom continued proudly. "When people hear about a young man sacrificing his own comfort to help his sister's children have stability, they want to be part of that kindness." As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "Jake and Dad finished setting up the kids' room today. It looks amazing. Tommy is going to love it. Thank you again for everything, little brother. You're the best." But I had not given permission for any room setup, and I had not seen my condo since discovering the first round of belongings that morning. They had spent the entire day rearranging my home without my knowledge, using donated furniture from unsuspecting community members who believed they were helping with a generous family arrangement. The level of deception was staggering, but what hurt most was realizing that my entire family had convinced themselves that their story was true. They were not consciously stealing from me in their minds. They had created such an elaborate false narrative that they genuinely believed I had offered my home, and that they were simply helping coordinate the generous gift I had supposedly made. The next few days passed in a surreal blur as I continued to gather information while pretending everything was normal. On December 30th, I received a group text message from Sarah that made my blood run cold. "Packing party tomorrow at Mom and Dad's. We're doing the final organization before the big move to Baldwin's place on January 2nd. Come help if you can, pizza and beer provided." The message was sent to what appeared to be our entire extended family, including cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Sarah was organizing an actual party to coordinate the theft of my home, and she was treating it like a celebration. I decided I had to see this for myself. On New Year's Eve morning, I drove to my parents' house. The scene I encountered was like something from a bizarre nightmare. The entire front yard was filled with vehicles. My cousin Diana's truck, Uncle Pete's SUV, Aunt Martha's sedan, and several other cars belonging to family friends. Through the front windows, I could see the house bustling with activity. I walked up to the front door and let myself in. The living room had been completely transformed into a staging area for moving supplies. There were dozens of cardboard boxes, rolls of packing tape, bubble wrap, and moving blankets spread across every surface. At least 15 people were working together, sorting belongings and preparing them for transport. Baldwin. Sarah spotted me immediately and rushed over with a huge smile. Perfect timing. We're getting everything ready for the big day. My cousin Diana looked up from a box she was packing with kitchen items. This is so amazing what you're doing, Baldwin. Sarah's been telling us how you just offered your place without her even asking. That's real family love right there. I forced a smile. Just trying to help out where I can. We all are, said Mrs. Johnson, an elderly woman from my parents' church, whom I had met several times over the years. When Linda told us about your gift to your sister's family, Harold and I knew we had to contribute something. That dining set we donated will look beautiful in your downtown place. Around the room, I began to understand the full scope of what had happened. These people were not just family members helping with a move. They were community members who had been moved by the story of my supposed generosity and had donated items specifically to help Sarah's family get settled in my home. Baldwin, come see what we've done with the organization system, my father called from the dining room. Diana suggested we color code everything by room destination. I followed him into the dining room where a complex system of colored stickers and labels had been created. Green stickers meant living room, blue meant kitchen, yellow meant Tommy's room, and so on. There were literally hundreds of boxes and items, each carefully labeled for placement in specific rooms of my condo. This is very thorough, I said, my voice somehow remaining steady. Diana used to work for a professional moving company, Dad explained proudly. She's got this down to a science. We'll be able to get Sarah's family completely settled in one day. Where's the moving truck coming from? Oh, Diana rented it already. Sarah chimed in, appearing beside us. A 26-foot truck should be plenty big enough for everything. And Uncle Pete volunteered his pickup truck as backup, in case we need extra space. I looked around the dining room more carefully and realized that this was not just household items and furniture. There were boxes labeled Tommy's school supplies, Amy's art projects, Jake's workshop tools, and even Sarah's home office setup. They had planned out every detail of how to completely establish a household in my condo. Sarah, can I see the floor plans you mentioned? I asked, maintaining my helpful tone. She immediately pulled out a folder filled with hand-drawn diagrams. I've been working on these for weeks, she said, spreading the papers across the table. I measured every room when we were there last week, and I think I've figured out the perfect layout for everyone's needs. The floor plans were incredibly detailed. She had marked exact furniture placement, planned color schemes for each room, and even indicated where children's toys and books would be stored. In the master bedroom, she had planned out closet organization for her and Jake's belongings. In my home office, she had designed a complete bedroom setup for Tommy, including a desk area for homework and wall space for his baseball posters. This is really impressive planning, I said, studying the diagrams. The best part is the guest room, Sarah continued excitedly. We can set it up with bunk beds for Amy and Brad, and there's still space for a play area. The kids are so excited about having their own downtown space. My cousin Mark appeared beside us. Speaking of space, Sarah, I wanted to confirm the dates I can use the guest room for my job interviews. The law firm I'm interviewing with has offices just a few blocks from Baldwin's building, so staying there would be incredibly convenient. I stared at Mark. Job interviews? Yeah, I've got 3 interviews lined up for mid-January with firms in the downtown area. Sarah said I could crash at the place for a few days to avoid the commute from Colorado Springs. And don't forget about Dad's boat storage, Uncle Pete added, overhearing our conversation. That garage space is going to be perfect for keeping the boat secure during winter months. I really appreciate you letting me use it, Baldwin. The realization hit me like a truck. Not only had Sarah planned to take over my home, but she had also promised access to various family members for their own needs. My guest room was being offered as temporary housing for job seekers. My garage was being promised as boat storage. My home was being treated like a family resource available to anyone who needed it. "We should probably start loading the truck soon," Diana announced to the room. "I want to get everything moved over before noon, so we can have the unpacking done by dinner time." Actually, Jake spoke up from the kitchen. "Sarah and I were thinking we should do a final walkthrough of the place first, just to make sure all our measurements are correct and the furniture will fit properly." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Great idea. Baldwin, do you want to meet us over there around 10 o'clock? You can give us the official handover and maybe take some pictures to commemorate the moment." The entire room was looking at me expectantly, waiting for my response to this request for an official handover ceremony for my own home. "That sounds like a great idea," I said, my smile feeling more forced than ever. 10 o'clock works perfectly. As the evening wound down and people began heading home, I helped carry boxes to cars and listened to dozens of family members express their admiration for my supposed generosity. Each conversation felt like a knife twist, but I maintained my helpful demeanor throughout. "You're setting such a wonderful example," Aunt Martha told me as she prepared to leave. "In a world where families often grow apart, you're showing what it means to really take care of each other." "Sarah's children are so lucky to have an uncle who cares this much about their future," added Mrs. Patterson, an elderly family friend. "That downtown location will give them access to so many opportunities." By the time everyone had left, my parents' house looked like a disaster zone. Empty boxes were stacked everywhere, packing materials covered the floors, and furniture that had been collected over weeks was now organized and ready for transport. "I think that went really well," my mother said, surveying the organized chaos. "Everyone is so excited to help tomorrow. It's going to be like a barn raising, but for Sarah's new home." As I drove back to my condo that night, I called Marcus to confirm the legal documents I would need. Tomorrow morning, before my family arrived for their fake handover ceremony, I would be signing paperwork to sell my condo to the first cash buyers who had made an offer. The young couple, Jason and Emma, had been thrilled to find a downtown condo priced for quick sale. They could close immediately and were planning to take possession on January 1st. By the time my family arrived for their 10 o'clock ceremony, my home would legally belong to someone else. I spent my last night in my condo, packing the few personal belongings I truly cared about, and arranging for storage of items I could not immediately take with me. As I looked around the space I had worked so hard to afford, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination. Tomorrow my family would learn that their elaborate deception had consequences. But more importantly, I would finally understand who they really were beneath the surface of family loyalty and love. On New Year's morning, I woke up early and methodically executed the final phase of my plan. At 8 o'clock, I met Jason and Emma at a coffee shop near my building to sign the final closing documents. My real estate attorney had worked through the holiday to expedite the sale, and everything was ready for immediate transfer. "Are you sure about this timeline?" Jason asked as we reviewed the paperwork. "It seems really rushed." "I'm absolutely certain," I replied, signing document after document. "I need to relocate for work immediately, and a quick sale works best for everyone involved." Emma smiled warmly. "We're just excited to finally have a place of our own. The location is perfect for both of our jobs, and the price is incredibly fair." As I signed the deed transfer, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Getting the truck loaded now. See you at 10 for the big moment." I finished the paperwork and shook hands with Jason and Emma. "The building management company has your contact information, and they'll meet you here at noon to transfer the keys and access codes." "And you're sure there won't be any issues with previous occupants or anything?" Emma asked. "The building manager mentioned that someone had been asking questions about our unit." "There might be some confusion this morning, but I'll handle it personally," I assured them. By the time you take possession this afternoon, everything will be completely clear. From the coffee shop, I drove straight to my parents' house. The scene was even more chaotic than the previous evening. The rented moving truck was parked in the driveway, and at least 10 family members were working together to load boxes and furniture. Diana was directing traffic, like a professional moving coordinator, checking items off lists, and ensuring everything was loaded in the most efficient order. Uncle Pete's pickup truck was already full of smaller items, and Jake's tools. "Perfect timing, little brother," Sarah said when she saw me arrive. "We're almost ready to head over to your place." I watched in fascination as my extended family worked together with military precision to steal my home. Everyone was so cheerful and organized, treating the whole event like a joyful family project. "Baldwin, can you double-check that we have the right keys?" my father asked, holding up a ring with several keys. "We made copies of the spare you gave us, but I want to make sure we can get the truck into the underground parking garage." I realized that not only had they duplicated my spare key without permission, but they had also somehow gained access to my parking garage remote and duplicated that as well. "Those should work fine," I said, "but I actually have a better idea. Why don't I meet you over there and handle all the access issues myself?" "That would be great," Sarah beamed. "Then you can really be part of the whole moving process." I excused myself, claiming I needed to grab a few personal items from the condo before the family arrived. What I actually needed was to ensure that Jason and Emma understood exactly what was going to happen at noon when they took possession. I drove to my building and met with the property management team. I explained that there might be some confusion later in the day involving people who believed they had permission to access my former unit. The new owners will be here at noon for key transfer. I told the building manager, a professional woman named Carol. Before that happens, there may be people arriving who claim to have rights to the unit. They do not. They are family members who have been operating under some false assumptions about property ownership. Carol nodded seriously. "We've actually had some complaints from other residents about unauthorized people accessing the 15th floor multiple times recently. Should we call security if they show up?" "Let me handle it initially," I said. "But if the situation becomes difficult, absolutely call security and the police if necessary." I gave Carol my new cell phone number and the contact information for Marcus, my attorney, in case legal questions arose. Then, I drove back toward my parents' house, timing my arrival to coincide with the departure of the moving convoy. The sight of the moving truck followed by 3 cars full of family members driving toward my downtown building was surreal. I followed at a distance, knowing that this was the last time I would see my condo as my home. At 10 o'clock, I met my family in the parking garage beneath my building. Everyone was excited and ready to begin unloading, but I suggested we do the walkthrough first as planned. "Great idea," Sarah said. "I want to make sure everything is going to fit perfectly before we start hauling furniture upstairs." We took the elevator to the 15th floor, and I unlocked my front door for what I knew would be the last time. My family poured into the condo, immediately beginning to plan furniture placement and discussing room assignments. "This is even more beautiful than I remembered," my mother said, looking around the living room. "Sarah, the children are going to love growing up here." "And the view is incredible," Jake added, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Tommy's going to love watching the city from his new room." Sarah was already measuring spaces with a tape measure, double-checking her furniture plans against the actual rooms. "Everything should fit perfectly," she announced. "Baldwin, do you want to say anything official about the handover?" I looked around at my family, all of them so happy and excited about taking possession of my home. For just a moment, I felt a pang of doubt about what I was about to do. These were people I loved, people who had raised me and supported me throughout my life. But then, I remembered the fake text messages, the forged documents, the systematic deception that had been going on for months. This was not a family temporarily needing help. This was an organized effort to steal my home through lies and manipulation. Actually, I said, I think the best handover ceremony will be letting you all move in and make the space your own. I'm going to head out and let you focus on getting everything organized." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "We'd love to have you be part of setting up the kids' rooms." "I'm sure," I replied. "I have some errands to run anyway. Take your time and make yourselves at home." I hugged each family member goodbye, including the children who had been brought along to see their new home. Tommy was especially excited about his planned bedroom, and Amy was already discussing how she wanted to decorate the guest room. As I left the building, I drove straight to the airport. My flight to Seattle was not until 6 o'clock that evening, but I wanted to be completely away from downtown Denver before my family discovered what had actually happened. At the airport, I checked my luggage and found a quiet corner of the departure lounge. At exactly noon, I received a text confirmation from my real estate attorney. "Sale complete. Deed transferred. Jason and Emma are now the legal owners." At 12:15, my phone began to ring. The first call was from Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. Then Jake called. Then my father. Then my mother. Then Sarah again. I turned off my phone and waited for my flight to board, knowing that my family was discovering that they had spent months planning to steal a home that no longer belonged to me. As my plane lifted off from Denver International Airport, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Through the small airplane window, I could see the downtown skyline, where my family was presumably discovering that their elaborate plan had completely collapsed. I had arranged to stay in a corporate housing unit near my company's Seattle office for the next few months. The project I was assigned to was real, though I had specifically requested the transfer after learning about my family's deception. I needed distance, both geographical and emotional, to process everything that had happened. The flight attendant announced that passengers could now use electronic devices, so I turned my phone back on. Immediately, notifications began flooding in. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages, and 6 voicemails, all from family members. I decided to listen to the voicemails chronologically to understand how events had unfolded at the condo. The first message was from Sarah at 12:23 p.m. "Baldwin, there are people here saying they own your condo. This couple says they bought it and they have papers. Call me back immediately. This has to be some kind of mistake." The second was from my father at 12:38 p.m. "Son, we need you to come back to your building right away. There's some confusion about ownership, and these people are saying you sold the place to them. We've got all of Sarah's furniture in the truck and nowhere to put it." The third message was Jake at 1:15 p.m., and his tone was significantly more angry. "Baldwin, what the hell is going on? These people called the cops on us when we tried to unload the truck. The police said we're trespassing. Call me back right now." The fourth was my mother, clearly crying at 1:47 p.m. "Honey, please call us back. Everyone is so confused and upset. Sarah's children are asking why they can't go into their new home, and we don't know what to tell them. There has to be some explanation for this." The fifth voicemail was Sarah again at 2:21 p.m. "Baldwin, I just talked to the building manager, and she said you arranged this sale weeks ago. She said you told her we didn't have permission to be here. Why would you do this to us? Why would you let us plan everything if you were going to sell the place?" The final voicemail was from my father at 3 o'clock, and his tone was a mixture of hurt and rage. "Son, I don't understand what's happening here. We trusted you. We believed in your generosity, and now it feels like you've been lying to us for weeks. Your sister's family has nowhere to go, and everyone who helped them feels like fools. Call us back and explain yourself." I scrolled through the text messages, which ranged from confused to angry to pleading. Sarah had sent nearly 20 messages herself, including photos of the moving truck still loaded with furniture and images of her children crying outside my former building. One text from Uncle Pete particularly caught my attention. "Baldwin, I drove 4 hours to help with this move and took time off work. Everyone donated furniture and time based on what we thought was your generous offer. What's really going on here?" Diana had sent several messages expressing concern. "Your family is really hurt and confused. I've never seen Sarah cry like this. If there was some reason you changed your mind, couldn't you have told everyone before we spent 2 days organizing this move? But it was a message from my cousin Mark that really captured the scope of the situation. Baldwin, I understand there might be some explanation for what happened today, but I need to know immediately if I can still use your place for my job interviews next week. I've already confirmed appointments based on staying there. Around 4 o'clock, while my plane was flying over the Rocky Mountains, I decided to call Marcus to get his perspective on the legal situation. I've been following the developments, he said when he answered. The property management company called me around 1:30 to confirm that the new owners had full legal rights to remove any unauthorized persons from the premises. Did anyone actually get arrested? No, but it was close. Apparently, your brother-in-law became quite argumentative with the police, insisting he had legal rights to occupy the property based on family arrangements. The officers had to explain several times that property ownership is determined by legal documents, not family conversations. Marcus continued. The new owners, Jason and Emma, handled the situation very professionally. When they arrived and found your family unloading furniture, they tried to explain politely that there had been some misunderstanding. It was only when Jake became aggressive that they felt they needed to call for help. How did my family react when they realized what had happened? According to the property manager, there was a lot of shouting and crying. Your sister kept insisting that you had promised them the condo and showing people text messages on her phone. But obviously, those fake messages had no legal standing. Marcus paused. Baldwin, I have to ask, are you completely sure about cutting off contact like this? I understand you're angry about their deception, but this kind of family break can be permanent. I haven't cut off contact, I said. I just needed to make sure their fraud was completely exposed before I was willing to engage with them. Well, when you're ready to talk to them, they're going to have a lot of questions. The pilot announced that we were beginning our descent into Seattle. I looked out the window at the city where I would be living for the foreseeable future, a place where nobody knew about my family situation, and I could start fresh. My phone buzzed with one final message as we landed. It was from Sarah. Baldwin, I found out about your flight to Seattle. I know you planned this. I know you've been lying to us for weeks. But those children don't deserve this. They spent 2 days packing their rooms and saying goodbye to their friends because they thought they were moving to a better home. Whatever I did wrong, they didn't do anything wrong. Please just call me back and help us figure out what to do now. As passengers began gathering their belongings to exit the plane, I realized that my family crisis was far from over. In fact, the hardest conversations were still ahead of me. I spent my first week in Seattle completely disconnected from my family, while I processed everything that had happened. My corporate housing was a furnished studio apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and I threw myself into the new work project with an intensity that surprised my colleagues. But on January 7th, exactly 1 week after the moving disaster, I finally decided it was time to face the consequences of my decision. I powered on my phone to discover 78 missed calls, over 200 text messages, and 43 voicemails from family members, family friends, and even people I did not recognize. The sheer volume of communication was overwhelming, so I decided to start with the most recent messages to understand the current situation. My mother had called 4 times that morning. Baldwin, honey, we know you're angry about something, but we need to talk. Sarah's family had to move into a motel, and they can't afford to stay there much longer. Whatever happened, we can work through it together. Sarah had sent a long text message the night before. Baldwin, I've been thinking about everything for a week now. I realize there might have been some miscommunication about your condo situation. I never meant to assume anything or overstep boundaries. Can we please talk and figure out how to fix this? But it was a voicemail from my father that really captured how the situation had developed. Son, I've been talking to Marcus, and he explained some things about property law that I didn't understand before. I think I made some mistakes in how I tried to help Sarah's situation. We need to have a serious conversation about what really happened here. I decided to call Marcus first to get an objective perspective on what my family had been going through. They've been calling me almost daily, he said. At first, they were angry and demanding that I explain how you could steal back your own property. But over the past few days, I think they're starting to understand the legal and ethical problems with what they were planning. How much of the truth do they know? Well, Sarah admitted to creating the fake text messages, though she claims she only did it to make the family feel better about accepting your generosity. Your father acknowledged that he was wrong to research property transfer options without your knowledge. And your mother seems to understand that accepting community donations based on a false story was inappropriate. Marcus continued, "The bigger issue is the practical situation. Sarah's family really is in a difficult spot financially. When they gave up their previous housing situation, based on the assumption that they would be moving to your place, they put themselves in a vulnerable position." Where are they staying now? Initially, they went to a motel, but that was too expensive. For the past 3 days, they've been staying with your Aunt Martha, but that's not a long-term solution with 3 children. I realized that regardless of my anger about the deception, there were innocent children involved who had been hurt by the collapse of their housing plans. That evening, I called my parents' house. My mother answered on the first ring. "Baldwin, oh thank goodness. We've been so worried about you." "Hi, Mom. I think we need to have a serious conversation about everything that happened." "Yes, we absolutely do. Can you come home? We can all sit down together and work through this misunderstanding." This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. Sarah created fake text messages from me, filed false legal documents, and had been systematically lying to everyone in the family for months. Jake and Dad tried to research ways to steal my property. You accepted charity donations from your community based on false stories. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Honey, I think we all made some mistakes in how we handled the situation," she said finally. "But we're family. Family forgives each other and finds ways to move forward." Mom, what Sarah did was not a mistake. It was fraud. She committed multiple felonies and she involved all of you in her crimes. Baldwin, those are very harsh words for someone who was just trying to provide stability for her children. Mom listened to me carefully. Sarah never asked me if her family could use my condo. She never discussed their housing problems with me. She created fake evidence of my permission and built an entire plan around stealing my home. That's not someone trying to provide for her children. That's someone committing crimes. Over the next hour, I walked my mother through every piece of evidence I had discovered: the security footage of unauthorized access to my property, the fake utility bills used for school enrollment, the forged property transfer documents, the false government benefit applications. By the end of the conversation, my mother was crying. "I had no idea it was so extensive," she said. "Sarah told us that you had offered the place and that you were just being modest about it. We believed her because we wanted to believe that our family takes care of each other." But Mom, none of you ever asked me directly. In 3 months of planning, none of you thought to have a simple conversation with me about whether I had actually made this offer. "You're right," she admitted. "We got caught up in the story and we didn't think to verify it. That was wrong." The following day, Sarah called me directly. "Baldwin, I know you're angry, and I understand why," she said. "I made some bad decisions about how to handle our housing situation." "Sarah, you didn't make bad decisions. You committed crimes. You forged legal documents, filed false government claims, and involved innocent people in your fraud." "I never meant for it to go that far," she said, her voice shaking. "When Jake lost his job, I was desperate to find somewhere stable for the kids. When I mentioned to Mom that it would be nice if you could help us, she suggested that maybe you would offer your place since you travel so much. I started talking about it like it was a real possibility, and then it just snowballed from there. So you created fake text messages to support your lie? I thought if everyone believed you had offered, then maybe you would actually make the offer for real. I thought you would see how much the family supported the idea, and you would decide to help us." The twisted logic was breathtaking. Sarah had committed fraud in hopes that her fraud would pressure me into making her lies come true. "Sarah, you enrolled your children in school using false documents. You applied for government benefits using fraudulent residency claims. You forged property transfer papers. These are serious crimes that could result in prison time." I know," she said, crying. "I've been talking to a lawyer, and he explained how much trouble I could be in." Baldwin: "I'm terrified that I could lose my children if I get arrested." For the first time in weeks, I felt genuine sympathy for Sarah. Not for the situation she had created, but for the fear she was experiencing about the consequences. "Sarah, I'm not planning to press criminal charges, but there have to be real consequences for what you did." "What kind of consequences?" "First, you need to contact every government agency where you filed false information and correct the record. Second, you need to personally apologize to every family member and community member who was deceived by your lies. Third, you need to pay back any benefits you received based on fraudulent claims." "I can do all of that," she said quickly. "Fourth, you and Jake need to find legitimate housing and employment without any assistance from me or our parents. You need to prove that you can take care of your family through honest work, not through schemes and manipulation." Baldwin: "We're trying, but it's really hard to find affordable housing with Jake's employment situation." "That's a real problem that requires real solutions, not fake ones. There are legitimate resources available for families in housing crises. Social services, nonprofit organizations, job training programs. You need to access those resources instead of trying to steal from family members." Over the following weeks, I maintained regular communication with my family while staying in Seattle. Sarah did follow through on her promises to correct the fraudulent government filings and to apologize to community members who had been deceived. Jake eventually found steady work with a roofing company, and they were able to secure a small rental house in a less expensive neighborhood. My parents required more time to fully understand how their behavior had contributed to the situation. My father eventually acknowledged that researching property transfer options without my knowledge was a serious violation of trust. My mother struggled to accept that accepting charity donations based on false stories was wrong, but she did return the items to their donors, along with honest explanations. The extended family members who had participated in the moving day were initially angry with me for humiliating them, but over time, most of them came to understand that they had been victims of Sarah's deception rather than participants in my generosity. In March, I returned to Denver for a family dinner where we addressed the situation directly. Sarah's children had adjusted well to their new school and housing situation. Jake was doing well in his new job. Most importantly, Sarah seemed to understand the seriousness of what she had done. "I've been thinking a lot about why I made those choices," she said during dinner. "I think I convinced myself that taking care of my kids justified any method, even dishonest ones. But I realize now that teaching them that lies and manipulation are acceptable is worse than having them live in a smaller house." "What have you learned from all this?" I asked. "I've learned that real family support means asking for help honestly, not taking what you want, and justifying it later. I've learned that my kids need a mother who solves problems through hard work and integrity, not through schemes." My father added, "I've learned that wanting to help my family doesn't give me the right to make decisions about other people's property. I should have talked to you directly, instead of assuming I knew what was best for everyone. And I've learned," my mother said, "that feeling good about someone's generosity doesn't mean I shouldn't verify that the generosity is real." I got so caught up in being proud of Baldwin that I didn't bother to confirm he had actually done what I was proud of. As we finished dinner, my nephew Tommy, who was now 8 years old, asked me a question that captured the heart of everything that had happened. "Uncle Baldwin, why didn't you just let us live in your old house? We would have been really good tenants." I thought carefully about how to answer him in a way he could understand. Tommy, imagine if someone took your favorite toy without asking you, even if they planned to take really good care of it. How would that make you feel? Mad, he said immediately. Right. It wouldn't matter if they had good reasons for wanting the toy, or if they promised to give it back later. Taking something without permission is wrong, even when it's done by people who love you. But what if they really needed the toy? Then, they should ask for it honestly, and accept whatever answer they get. And if the person says no, they should find other solutions to their problem instead of just taking what they want. Tommy nodded seriously. So mommy should have asked you instead of pretending you said yes. Exactly. 6 months later, I moved back to Denver and bought a smaller condo in a different neighborhood. Sarah's family was doing well in their rental house. Jake had been promoted to crew leader at his roofing job, and the children were thriving in their neighborhood school. Most importantly, our family had learned to communicate honestly about problems instead of creating elaborate fantasies about solutions that had never been agreed upon. The experience taught me that protecting yourself from manipulation is not selfishness. It's necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. Real love and family support are built on honest communication and mutual respect, not on one person sacrificing their well-being to enable another person's poor choices. I learned that when people show you who they really are through their actions, you should believe them the first time. But I also learned that people can change and grow when they face real consequences for their behavior and choose to learn from their mistakes rather than making excuses for them. My family is closer now than we were before the crisis, not because we pretend it never happened, but because we confronted the problems directly and created better ways of relating to each other based on honesty and respect. Sarah often tells people that the experience of almost losing her children due to her own poor choices was the wake-up call she needed to become the parent and person she wanted to be. Jake says that having to face the consequences of depending on manipulation instead of hard work motivated him to develop real job skills and work ethic. My parents learned that enabling someone's bad behavior in the name of family loyalty actually hurts both the enabler and the person being enabled. They now offer emotional support to Sarah's family while maintaining clear boundaries about financial and housing assistance. As for me, I learned that standing up for yourself is not mean or selfish when it's done with clear consequences and the genuine hope that people you love will learn and grow from the experience. The most important lesson for all of us was that real family support means helping each other become better people through honesty, accountability, and genuine care, not through lies, manipulation, or enabling destructive behavior. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to refuse to participate in their self-destructive choices and to insist that they find better solutions to their problems. And sometimes protecting what you've worked hard to build is not just your right, but your responsibility to yourself and to the people who depend on you to be strong, honest, and reliable. Today, when my family faces problems, we talk about them directly instead of creating elaborate fantasies about solutions. We ask for help honestly and accept whatever answers we receive. We support each other through encouragement and practical assistance, but we don't enable destructive behavior or lie to make problems seem easier than they really are. It took almost losing each other completely for us to learn how to really be family to each other. But the lessons we learned have made us stronger, more honest, and more genuinely caring than we ever were before. What would you have done if you discovered that your family was systematically planning to steal your home through lies and manipulation? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace with family and protecting yourself from their harmful behavior? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it who might be dealing with similar family boundary issues. Subscribe for more stories about real-life situations where people had to make difficult choices about relationships and personal integrity. And please share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of honest communication and healthy boundaries in family relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you think about the difference between real family support and enabling destructive behavior in your own relationships. Remember that protecting yourself from manipulation is not selfish. It's necessary for building relationships based on genuine love and respect.